He is an internationally acknowledged geohazards specialist, known mainly for his outstanding contributions in landslide research, practice, and education, and the only Indian who received the Vance Medal. The Vance Medal is the highest award provided by the International Consortium on Landslides. It recognizes professional excellence in landslide research. His work on the landslides of the Himalayas is spread over more than 3 decades. He was the main contributor in the first landslide hazard atlas of India. Dr. R.K. Bhandari was the first to introduce instrumentation and monitoring of landslides in late 1970s. During his professional career, he has taken up several responsibilities in nation building. He was the head of the Geotechnical Engineering Group at CBRI. Later on, he became the director of CBRI. He is the UN Chief Technical Advisor of the Natural Disaster Mitigation UNDP. He was recently awarded the prestigious Subhash Chandra Bose Abda Prabandhan Puraskar 2021. With these words, I feel happy to have Dr. Bhandari at IIT Roorkee, and special thanks to him for agreeing to speak on this occasion. Let me end by also reminding all of us that he is also our distinguished visiting professor in the Center for Excellence in Disaster Mitigation and Management. Over to you, Dr. Sri Krishnan.
Thank you, Professor Chaturvedi. With this inauguration, I would now request Dr. Rajendra Kumar Bhandari to kindly take the stage for presentation, and questions to Dr. Bhandari shall be allowed after the talk. Also, participants can mention their question in the chat box, which will be answered after the presentation. Over to you, Dr. Bhandari. Kindly share your presentation.
At the outset, I thank Dr. Chaturvedi for very kind words. In fact, as far as Roorkee is concerned, now I stay in Delhi, and Roorkee is my second home, actually. And I have missed no opportunity to visit Roorkee. And whenever I visit Roorkee, I have lost no opportunity to visit him at the IIT. I am very pleased that I am talking in this series. I always believed that one of the ways to keep young is to keep the company of young people. And I am very grateful that I get repeated chances from IIT Roorkee. And I think that shows their concern that I should continue to stay young for a long time. So I assure you that so long as you think of me, I will think 2 or 3 times of you. Now, with these few words, let me begin with my lecture. I speak to you today on India's journey towards disaster resilient development. Can I control the slide from this side? No. Or do you have to?
No, sir. Just if you can just say next, I'll change it.
No, I think when I stop for a while, you assume that is next. Okay. Now, India is racing towards a rapid phase of development. You will see during the course of my presentation that we are a country today where the speed of construction and development is perhaps the fastest in the developing economies. And in this, we have a tacit assumption that anything and everything that we do is sustainable. Now, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. Take, for example, India's world-class infrastructure projects. These are all the projects that each one of you should know, and many of you might already be familiar with. We can boast of India's longest road tunnel, Chenani Nursery. I have already spoken to the center about it. One of the largest overbridges in Asia we have in Kanpur on National Highway 2. One of the longest river road bridge in the world, Mahatma Gandhi River Road Setu over Ganges, Patna to Hajipur. India's longest sea bridge, Bandra-Worli Sea Link, largest cloverleaf flyover in Asia, and world's highest rail bridge, that is Jannat. So I have listed only a few to give the examples to you, and you will know that when such projects come, engineers play a very big role. Every project has huge engineering interventions. Now, we are committed to ensure that the development is sustainable. So we have to put our hand on the heart and say whether those of us who are associated with these projects have walked the talk. That is important. Let us pause, look back and introspect. That's the best thing to do whenever you want to reflect on something which is very serious and important. This is the best way to have a pause. Now, safety and sustainability of these projects is very important. When we say sustainability, I'll tell you what the true meaning of it, but then it has to be available to us. Any service that we create, any development we create must be available to us at all times and serve the purpose for it is intended. Then we also have to ask the question, why at times what is aimed as development itself turned into disaster? Across the country, we find number of projects which were meant to hasten the pace of development. Some of them have ended up with disasters. So this is a vital question to ask. Also, what does sustainable development mean in thought, speech, and action? Now, sustainable development, as you should understand and everyone should understand, meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of the future generation to meet their own needs. So this is a very important point that you must always remember. And I will underscore it many times because for time and again, we have seen that when we talk in terms of sustainable development, it means many things to many people at the time of planning stage. But when it comes to designs and implementation of the designs, I think very small component of what we think at the planning stage gets carried on. World Summit on Sustainable Development took place on 26th of August to 4th September 2002. Then Johannesburg Plan came. Now, I have here a lot of information on this, that after that, Hugo framework came. Hugo framework also had a lot of things to say about sustainable development, and then Sendai framework. So, from 2002 onwards up to 2025, 2030, the commitment is that we are already doing something which is all-inclusive, multi-hazard resilient, sustainable development. Now, this has been our commitment. So engineers will have to ask the question, whatever designs and plans that have gone through them, do they pass this test? If they do not, it's a time to ponder. United Nations Decade for Education. You see, I'm talking to engineers in an educational institute of high repute. They should know that 2005 to 2015, United Nations Decade for Education was there for sustainable development. Now, this is long over, 7 years ago. And there it was promised that DRR, through revision of school curricula and also engineering colleges, this higher studies curricula, but has it happened? Initially, the target group was youth and children. And so, to give you a pause, this is what I mean by sustainable development, that everything that we should be on autopilot, and one thing should lead to another and another to another. But this is not happening. The trends are highly disturbing. We find that many of our structures, they collapse. Many of them collapse not long, soon after they are constructed. In Gujarat, 2001, spontaneous liquefaction made this sort of situation where the first floor became ground floor and ground floor went into the ground. And you see the colossal amount of tilting and all that. Next one. Now, this actually we should have learned from other experiences, because across the globe, whenever earthquakes have occurred, such things are very well known. In fact, the whole study started in 1964, and IIT Roorkee has played a lead role in telling the rest of the world about how the structures behave when there is an earthquake. But how is it that still in our country, many projects, they do not recognize the latest state of the art? They are not familiar with it. In fact, when you are in a hurry, you have to walk slowly. Next. Now, this is not only liquefaction. You see, all disasters of all shades and colors. There are a very large number of disasters. In fact, the High Power Committee to the Government of India and later the Disaster Management Plan, they list out more than 3 dozen disasters. Now, initially, there was a culture of looking at every disaster. Somebody will call himself or herself an earthquake specialist. Somebody will be landslide specialist, flood specialist. But now, so far as people are concerned, they want total safety. You may give your input as an expert, but we have to do it all together. Next one. So now these series of slides, we go quickly to demonstrate to you, tell you, illustrate to you that there have been development clock has been set back by decades because of these failures. Next one. Next. So this is a highway sector you saw, the bridge sector, and then the challenge to the response, disaster response. Next. Now, this is one of my favorite slides because it belongs to the time period when I was, it was my first job actually, and it is in North Sikkim. Now, as a civil engineer with a lot of interest in mountain systems and structures in the mountains, I had a fancy to look at the design of retaining walls and retaining structures provided there. And when I went to North Sikkim, I pointed out that this retaining wall is over-designed, but it is resting on a mass which itself is likely to move, and therefore there could be a failure. With this kind of remark, I had gone forward, and when I returned to the site, the failure had already taken place, which means that even contractors' bills were not paid by that time. Now, you know why I'm making this observation is that engineers are not supposed to look only at structural aspects of this. Here, you have to have a multidisciplinary nature where a geologist, a geotechnical engineer, a hydrogeologist, a civil engineer, and of course, a highway engineer, all will have to work together. Next. So now come to the story of 7th February 2021, and we celebrated yesterday the 1 year of this day before yesterday. NDMA organized a program on this, and I happened to speak on that. My point here in showing this to you is that 1 year has passed since this tragedy occurred. More than 200 people were killed, and the whole world took notice of it. Dozens of papers have been written on that. Many people have visited the site. NDMA has, day before yesterday, released a report on this. That was a multidisciplinary effort done to do that report, and they have published this also. Now, my point is that engineering institutions have got a great responsibility that, and those researchers who are working on this has a great responsibility that posterity gets a documentation which is credible, which is peer-reviewed, and which tells different points of view and ultimately puts an analysis to come to a conclusion. Now, 4th of April 2021, I happened to speak about this. I studied and I was amazed the kind of interest, global interest in the event. So many publications have come. And since then, of course, I have seen the papers, I have reviewed some of the papers. And then day before yesterday, I saw the report has come. So my message here is that it's a fantastic opportunity for researchers to get into the various points of view. Don't always think that your point of view will prevail. There would be so many suggestions, so many points of view, and then come out with a document. That would really be a great educational value. The students would be able to appreciate better different points of view and then how you analyze this. That's point one. Point two is that we have to do things differently. Now, whole year we have spent in saying what had happened. We have photographs of it, aerial photographs of it, how many people were killed, what happened to our tunnels and powerhouses and things like that. And we have a fair detail of this. But what do we need? We need is that in future, such things should not occur. So what is our blueprint for that? That it will not occur in future. How do we know that what had happened in the past is not that on 7th of February, suddenly this event came and disturbed us. In geological time scale, changes have taken place and are taking place. As engineers, as scientists, as those who would like to investigate and go to the bottom of the truth, we must know what had happened. Now, all this to learn lessons and project what could happen in future. Now, that is where our weight of voice should be there. That is our work should be there, because as long as we only confine to do this to post-mortem investigation and say this has happened, whether there was a cloud burst or a glacier fell down, there was rapid motion flow and dam was created, breach of dam caused the floods and all that. There's a whole sequence that is important and you must do it. But what for? It is to give a message that all the development projects which are going on that area, how they are likely to be affected in future if there is a recurrence of that kind. So this is where we have to do things differently. We have to think in terms of the structures which are at risk and how that risk could be eliminated and what kind of projection, scenario projection should we have. Next one. So this is where a comparison is there, 6 to 8 February. Now, we are very fortunate to have the high resolution satellite pictures and all that, and that is indeed a great blessing. But this is aerial photography. Now, when we talk in terms of these events, we have to talk about right from the origin to the end, what happened, and then we have to do ground surveys. To find out this, we have to relate this to the past events. This is not the isolated event. So many events have happened in that area in the past. And I gave an account of it on the 6th of February. Some of you had attended that. So I won't repeat that. But what I'm saying is that all such events bring enormous amount of knowledge at our doorstep. And we have paid a very heavy price for it, but we have not taken the advantage. And that is what we have to do things differently. Don't only look at easy things like satellite imageries and things like that, but also go to the ground and take geologists, engineering geologists in your team, geotechnical engineers on your team, and of course, make use of large scale maps to project the hazard scenarios. And as some of us now strongly believe, it should be multi-hazard scenario. Next one. Now, India is a country where we have a frightening multi-hazard scenarios. So we have the advantage that so many institutions are there, so many experts are working on it. We have done so many PhDs and research scholars. They are not only working here, they are working abroad. They have brought laurels to the country. We have institutions which have documented these things, etc. But now the whole thing is that how can powerfully we can use science and technology and the big data analysis to link all these together. Now, 1897 was the Shillong earthquake. Many attempts have been made. In fact, when I was in IIT, CBRI, I used to have so many meetings in my conference room where people talked about the scenario projection that 1897 is overdue and might come. Now, if it is overdue and might come, now is the time to project scenarios. So differently, how we can do things differently? We can do things differently by taking it as it's not a question of if, it's a question of when the earthquake is going to come. And should it come, what would be the scenario? And for that, there may be a number of scenarios. And it's not only the hazard distribution that we need the elements at risk, that which of our hospital buildings, which are schools, which are the fire stations, government buildings, essential highway network, bridges, which of these are under danger, and then take timely action to take care of that. Next one. Why are we slaves of relief-centric approach? So this was there then, that so far all these things we were talking in our speeches and lectures, but very little went to the ground, and we were actually the slave of the relief-centric approach. That means everything will happen after the disaster has occurred. So all the time people have been thinking as to why not do things differently. And that vision was switch over from relief-centric to response-centric approach to prevention, preparedness, and mitigation. So this wisdom has not dawned yesterday. In fact, if you take the trace of it, is right in the 1992 or even the Earth Summit, which was there in the or Rio Summit. This all talked about, and prevention is better than cure is a saying that everyone knows. But have we walked the talk? That we say response-centric approach should be, the response is required, but the need for response should be minimized by building capacity, by having prevention and preparedness, and investing on mitigation. And the good news is that the Government of India, the 15th Finance Commission, has already agreed to disaster mitigation fund. So institutions like IIT and the center there, they should draw upon this disaster mitigation fund to create programs which will really bring this shift, tectonic shift, from the relief-centric approach to the prevention and mitigation. Next one. Now, the other commitment that we have is the integrate disaster mitigation with development planning. Now, this is not in speech. We have to really demonstrate that it's there. There should, in every project report, there should be a separate chapter on what initiatives or interventions we propose, which will link or integrate disaster mitigation with development planning. Now, this has been discussed. Those are young friends, they should, I put this slide only to tell them that this is ongoing discourse. National Disaster Risk Reduction Platform has been working, operating, and Government of India, Home Ministry, and DMA, they organize these meetings. Two of these I have been participating in those, and they were 2013, 2017. Mainstreaming of disaster risk reduction in development and from risk to resilience. So what we are talking about, really, many of these things, if you are a serious student, you follow it up, there will be mere repetition of what ought to be done and all that. But what has been done since, and how can we do it better? So that is the focus of the presentation I want to make. Next one. Global platform also, there's 20 to 26 May, and you should access this literature which is freely available on the internet. This is something which needs to be underscored, that whatever we, as engineers, with the kind of power of technology that we have, we can create several solutions to a single problem. But how do we choose the one which must go on the ground? So here, you must think of fostering, promoting, and sustaining eco-friendly engineering solutions. That means earlier, in olden days when I was a student, we were told cost effectiveness. Then came that, well, cost effectiveness is not the only thing. We have to have sustainability aspects and all that. Now we say that even if you demonstrate that the solution is going to be lasting and will not create problems, so long as it is not, eco-friendly, it should not be accepted. There has to be a conscientious effort to ensure that all solutions that we provide are eco-friendly, they are nature-friendly, and not this. Because take it from me, and you will agree with this with introspection, that no solution can be sustainable if it is not nature-friendly. So you have to befriend nature and you have to have eco-friendly solutions. So then came the urge to do things differently. Earlier we had the sustainable development. We used to talk, and we will say that we'll have culture of strategic thinking, culture of prevention, culture of preparedness, and culture of quick response. But we found that all the pillars crumbled, and only the quick response remained. So this was the kind of scenario now is changing. And let's not overtax the security forces, because, the NDRF and all that. So what message I am giving is that we have lot on our plate, grand opportunity to do it. India has world-class projects going on. We have no dearth of science and technology backing. Literature is full of knowledge. Only thing is that we have to apply that knowledge meaningfully. Next one. So, one point agenda there should be the culture of safety. I have said all the strategic thinking and all that. That means any of the designs that you produce, any plans you make, any small activity, I don't mean that I'm talking of 20,000, 30,000 crore projects, which I showed you in the beginning. Any small thing that you do, it should be a part of your habit to see that, yes, you are talking about not safety, culture of safety, not total safety, culture of total safety. Because by talking about safety, you can solve this and that problem for once. But by talking about culture of safety, you are not only solving a particular problem, but you become an inspiration to others who look at your solution, and it's a multiplier effect. So that is where I say that what you used to talk in 90s, in late 1999 and 2000, 22 years down, this has not permeated in our practice. That we talk about safety, we do designs which are safe and all that, we certify them as safe, we refer to the codal practices and all that, and say that nothing needs to be done more. But it must also add that how can we really do this in a manner that it will breed that culture. So this is one underscoring point here, that nurture and establish culture of strategic thinking, culture of capacity building, culture of disaster prevention, and culture of quick response. If you want to do things differently, you will have to talk in terms of culture, not only strategic thinking, not only capacity building. You have never seen people emphasizing enough the culture part of it. Next. Now, so when I repeatedly tell you do things differently, what do I mean? You might get sick and tired of my saying this. By this, I mean that when there is a darkness around, darkness of disasters, one after the other, in fact, we say calamities come in a row, then everybody is out to do something or the other. We try to design structures which will not fail. We try to have relief and response capacities and so on and so forth. We try to really make plans and designs and things like that. And only the aim is not disasters, not to let disasters happen, not to let tragedies happen, not to let people get killed, all that. But that will not bring about development. You see, you have to show light. So when you have darkness, one way to fight is that do everything in your armory to try to lessen the darkness and improve upon the situation. The other is bring enough light so that darkness disappears. Now, this is what my point of view is, and I will establish it that when we talk in terms of estimating, or let's say project understanding the hazards and multiple hazards, the kind of approaches that we are using are not going to pay. If you don't believe in me, you will believe after a week or 10 days, or some maybe after 10 months or 10 years, but that is bound to come, because I am convinced over a period of time that the approaches that we are following will lessen the problem, will reduce the disasters, will bring some relief. But if you want to totally come out of it, then we'll have to have a different approach. So first is that I quote here from a Roman philosopher: if a man does not know to what port he is steering, no wind is favorable to him. What we are finding today is lots of things are being done. They are highly desirable and all that. But all of them don't add up to a particular direction that we should take. They are going to bring some relief here and there. They are going to be acclaimed also as good, useful outputs and outcomings, and impact will be positive. But what I want to say is that at the national level and then at multiple levels, there has to be a clear sense of direction that where we are going. So when any student does any project or something, he should think 10 times about the direction in which is going and try to maintain that direction. There has to be focus on that. Next one. So for that, you need strategy. Next one. Next. Now, all that therefore you have to do is to have daily habit. When you look at the projects that you do and all that, you have to have very clear understanding of what is very vital for the project, where you must go whole hog and do whatever is necessary, what is essential and what is desirable. I have seen that if we have a mix-up of this, bulk of our time goes in whatever is desirable and many vital things are left out. Next one. So here is a picture. You will see is a kind of thermometer here. So the red zone is the zone where the things are out of control. I mean, we have small problems, we neglect them, they become bigger, sometimes they become intractable. And lower part is the green light, where the problems are very small. So how do you do things differently now? I'm telling you that our way of working is the same, whether it's a green light zone or a red light zone. A problem is there, engineering intervention, you produce design, somebody implements this and we think that there will be relief. No, you have to have a strategy. What is the strategy? First part of the strategy is, if you want to do things differently, don't allow the small problems to become bigger. At modicum of investment, you will be able to take care of small problems and control them. This is what I've shown the blue color here, that 100% benefits would be there if you invest on that, and then you come to a safety this thing. Now, if you don't do that and don't follow this advice, you are in the red zone. There huge amount of investment is necessary, and still you will have risks factors there. So you have to pay a very heavy price and forget ever that you will get sustainable development in the red zone, because you will not have that order of investment, money, time, or whatever resource to be able to do that. So this is where I say that please have your strategy, show your direction, that yes, this is there, and there are examples that I've, those of you who are interested can write to me. I'll cite to you the papers where I have emphasized this point even more. Next one. And then of course the teamwork. What I find is that we are solo players, and what we need here is the orchestra play. So I would say that in many project teams that I saw, what I find is that many of the players are missing, I mean, these days, it's not the monopoly of structural engineers or geotechnical engineers or geologists only to say that they are enough to guard the fort. You have to involve many other disciplines. Next one. And then you have to have a vision where from whole to part, when I talked about this Sendai framework and all this is what for nothing, you have to see that this is a global problem. Then it's a national level, then you have regional level, then you have a local level problem, and there's interconnection. And natural laws are irrefutable and they are same for all. So you have to have that kind of vision, and then you can solve the local problem. But don't lose the sight of the scale. Then, of course, the action should be from local to global. Next one. So what are the challenges then? Disaster risk reduction and total safety of infrastructure development has to be in the multi-hazard. So that habit that we used to have, and many of us even have now, that is earthquake safe construction. In fact, I have seen many of the reports of the heritage structures, protection of heritage structures in fragile ecosystem. And I have often seen people talking that this heritage structure is safe against landslides. If I ask a question, is it also safe against floods? Is it also safe against earthquake? No, sir, that I have not studied. So this is where you have to see that as a condition. You have no choice given now. There was a choice earlier that I'm an earthquake specialist, so I'll confine to that. No, you have to team with those who are other specialists also to deliver multi-hazard safety. That's point one. Point second is that vision, policies, strategies, and shared goals to achieve this should be based on total safety. Now, earlier we had these policies also which promoted that. For instance, we had a system whereby every ministry in the government was asked to do certain job. For example, floods. If it's a riverine flood, you go to Central Water Commission. Is urban flood, you go to Urban Development Ministry. And if there's a landslide, you go to Ministry of Mines. And if it's an avalanche, you go to Ministry of Defense. Now, that is not really something which is going to work, because there could be everything together. And therefore, we have to have that kind of emphasis, and we have to do different approaches to see that we are able to promote this has to come from professionals to the government. And then I'm sure that they will be able to shape the policies. What to be our institutional mechanism, that is also very important. You see, many people, many institutions I've seen, when they are assigned certain projects, they limit the work on that project to the capacity, their own capacity or capacity in the neighborhood. But I think the time has come when the best of the talent should be brought in, and there has to be networking to deliver on the projects. Next one. Take examples of how we could do things differently again. Yes. Understanding of multi-hazard. Please move faster in this, because I don't want to, I want to go quicker now on this. There's a lot I have to say and time is short. So what I'm saying is the present methods, which are IIT Roorkee has contributed a lot in mapping, and Dr. Chaturvedi mentioned about this hazard zonation map that I prepared. But this is now how much value it is, other than the historic remembrance. Please pass on some of these slides. Yeah, we do the GIS, and wait a minute here. This one, we have layers. We have, let's say, land use, land planning, geology, and all those attributes. And then we integrate on GIS platform and produce a beautiful map. But is it field validated? No. That was told in 2000. Now here is the Atlas, map from Atlas, where a number of institutions in NRSA Atlas 2001 from Department of Space. Many institutions played a part, and when I actually discussed this at Wadia Institute, I found that it has not been field validated. And now I don't know, 21 years later, whether we can still look at that Atlas. So these are very vital questions, and we have to do things differently. Next one. Yeah, so this was redrawn by me at that time that it should look like this. And now, of course, many more changes would have come. Next one. Yeah, next. So now the point is that we should use all the technology, all satellite imageries, whatever you have, computational methods to produce certain maps. Then you have the real picture. So there has to be validation of those maps. First, the map should be to the scale you require. When you have local problems, you cannot look at the atlases and maps of 50,000 scale or 1 million scale. You have to be 10,000, 5,000, 1,000 scale. So that is the first part of it. Secondly, these should be field validated maps. Third, they should be user-friendly maps. It's not engineers who are going to look at it. People are also going to look at it. And finally, you should also have the vulnerability map and also the elements at risk, the infrastructure map. Now, infrastructure is growing. And so if you don't take construction into account, mining or whatever is happening on the ground, which is also causing instability and hazard, none of these maps recognize that. And so if you don't recognize all this and you still produce a map, which leads to some conclusion, you have a question to answer that how relevant is that analysis? Do you really understand the disasters by looking at those? That's the point. Next one. Next, please, quickly. No, I have to quickly. Okay. Next. Yeah. So with this one, then I bring a very big example to you. The National Disaster Management Authority in 2012-2013 thought of projecting scenarios. Everybody says that unless we understand risk, we cannot do anything. For understanding risk, we have to have the scenario projection of hazard. We have to know vulnerability, and then we can find risk by knowing infrastructure and all. That exercise started in 2012, 2013. A report, I happened to really chair a small committee which looked into the findings of this on 18th of November 2014. Now, there, previous one, please. Previous slide. Yeah. They talked about hazard, vulnerability, risk, affected areas, consequences, impact on communities, responsibility, etc. Next one. And what should be policies, organizations, all that. Now, again, it came to my mind, how could we do things differently? What makes a difference? And some of the natural questions were that, do we know in any scenario projection that you might do, first thing you have to know what is the current multi-hazard scenario. Second, what is our current disaster management capacity? Third, what are the anticipated scenarios looking at different possibilities? Then, do we understand all this? And then, of course, when you talk about magnitude 8 earthquake, this is like atom bomb of 2,000 tons TNT. When we talk M7, energy of 30 times higher, and then M8 is, of course, like hydrogen bomb, only 1/30th of less than that. So when we are doing a projection of scenario 8 for Mandi earthquake, is it not the different way of doing thing would be that we find out whether if this magnitude 6 earthquake comes, which are our school buildings, hospitals, etc. would need attention. If magnitude 7 is there, what ought to be doing? And then if 8. So all our energies should be focused on such aspects which are very vital. That do we have enough capacity to handle 6? Do we have hospitals, buildings and all this? They are going to stay if there is a magnitude 6 earthquake or so. So this is where I would say that we have to deal with uncertainties and all that and turn the problem the other way around. Don't do the in a mechanical way to project the scenarios and give beautiful maps and charts, but ask a question that is our map, you'll be surprised. The IIT Roorkee has done a lot of work on earthquake-induced landslides. But seismic micro-resolution reports in the hilly areas do not recognize earthquake-induced landslides. Mandi earthquake, I was surprised, 8+ scenario projection, and they don't recognize earthquake-induced landslides. So here is the point that you have to do things differently. And now I am conscious of the fact that the time is over. So maybe since I don't have the control, if you can quickly run through the slide, I'll stop you at some places. Yeah. Yes. Now, yeah, please come back. Yeah, I'll talk to you something about the first-rate problems. You know, IIT Roorkee has made a huge contribution. And Professor Jay Krishna, his name is synonym with Terry Dam, and many of us learned a great deal, and we are proud of having put that dam there. Next one. So this is Terry Dam. Now, yes, its height is 260 meters. It's an earth and rock-filled dam on river Bhagirathi. And when the Kedarnath tragedy occurred, on 16th of June, water level rose from 750 meters to 775 meters, 25 meters of rise. And in 2008, water level rose to 763 meters. So there are cases where water level is rising. And this is a map, in fact, contributed by IIT. There are so many papers, in fact, it's not possible for me to talk about details, but then there are landslides in the rim area. So this was not anticipated at that time when Professor Jay Krishna was looking and all those maps were there. Many things have happened now in terms of change of river courses, in terms of landslides, their magnitude and all that. They were not happening now. And these are the danger points now, that if they happen and water level keep rising, what happens? The next one. Yes, please. No, the previous one. Yeah, this. Oh, this list of villages, I don't know. The villages, that list is not appearing. So I have listed here that immediate threat is there to very large number of villages. And so my message is that IIT is best placed to pick up those studies which are done in the past. Look at the earthquake-induced landslides and the landslide rim area. Look at the water level changes that have been taking place there. And then look at the safety of dozens of villages down the stream, and proactively do some kind of scenario projection, because I think if such things are not attended to in a collective manner, it's a team India work. And we should come out with some kind of a satisfaction and some kind of a confidence level building in the masses that their interests are being guarded. So this is one thing. Quickly, please turn. Yeah, you can escape that, all that. Yes. Yeah. Proceed further. Next. Yes. Now, this is the last point that I will make. In another 3-4 minutes, I'll try to wind up. Now, all these projects that I started with the world-class projects that we are doing and all that. Each one of them have a message. I take one by one, 3 or 4 kinds. Let's say widening of highways, Char Dham is being done and all that, widening highways. Do you remember the mountains are being removed, mountains of earth? Now, if you look at the geotechnical aspects of it, that the stress relief, what kind of dilatation effect is there, and what kind of impact of the disasters which have already taken place, the kind of scars which are hidden there, are our detailed project reports covering that aspect? The answer is no, they are not covering. Similarly, tunnels. The same situation is there, that we face the problems when the construction begins and all that. Many of these problems could be foreseen if we have the hydrogeologists working on that in a more effective manner. Then we have to have options. Why do we think in terms of tunnels only when we fail to make widened roads? Or why do we not think of viaducts and all that? So the message that I want to give is that all the multiple possibilities should be discussed studied at one time, and then you have to select the solution which is not nature friendly. So these are, of course, the technical points that how aquifers and all that, which are well-known things, they are taught in graduate courses in engineering. They have wide implications in the design, but they are not taken care of because that order of investigation is not there. So we should not use this sledgehammer approach. Sumit, I think now we're going to stop this. I will try to conclude it. So you just put it down, please, this thing. So in the end, I would say only 3 or 4 things which you mustn't forget. First thing is that the knowledge that we had and the technology we have, we are able to solve all problems. If we are not able to solve, it is our limitation. So when you find that there are problems which we are facing for 60 years, 70 years and all that, and they have not been solved, you have to ask a question, why this has happened? And you will very often find that this is lack of effort, determined effort on our part. So first is contain problems when they're small. Your half the load of work will be over. Second, that all those problems which you consider very important, hotspots, try to deal with them effectively. Not when I say effectively, it doesn't mean that you use some brute force of technology and solve this. They must be investigated properly and then done it. And third point that I'm making is never ever use a solution, even if it's 100% going to solve the problem, if it is not nature friendly. And nature friendly solutions are those which takes into account the water forces. In fact, in the mountain areas, hilly areas, if one thing can be done to improve a lasting relief to the region, is that don't tamper with natural water resources. And if you tamper with that, then you are inviting a big problem, which no technology will be able to solve. You can solve the problem for 6 months, 1 year and all that, but ultimately you will find that that will be your Waterloo. I have, converse of it is that the example which I had wanted to show was that many of the problems for which you bring all kinds of technologies, they are not necessary if you only take care of the natural drainage, because nature to be commanded must be obeyed. Natural laws are irrefutable. Nature is not going to come and complain to you, but it will pay. You will have to pay the price when it's there. So, my friends, I would end by saying that try to be yourself. Don't try to parrot what you read and what is told to you by scholars, by textbooks and all that. And so my parting sentence would be what Buddha said. You know, Buddha, Gautam Buddha, he lived for 44 years. He preached after getting nirvana. And his last message was that don't believe in anything just because I have said it, or it's in the religious books, or it is told by your professors, or it is inherited and time-tested thing that you find in books. But respect all those things. And then after due diligence, decide what is best in your interest and then do it. And nothing will upset you then. You will have no regrets and you would have done your job the way you should be doing. With these words, over to you, Sumit. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you, Dr. Bhandari. It was really wonderful to hear you, and I'll take this opportunity to hand over to Professor Srikrishnan.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Dr. Bhandari, for this very insightful talk and presentation. Now I invite questions and discussions to you. So audience, please, you can unmute yourself and ask your questions to Dr. Bhandari. There is a question in the chat box by Avinash Paswan. I'm reading it out. When we think of sustainable development, we always think of sustainability of resources and environment. What are the other factors which we can focus for better result in the field of disaster mitigation and management?
So when you think of sustainability, is all inclusive. So nothing is left out. So what is left out is because of our limitation of imagination. So when you talk in terms of safety, this, the first and the foremost is that you should really be very honest to your limitations, the sensitivities. You know, when we say that we understand risk, so people produce hazard maps and all that. And hardly I have seen a chapter on the limitations or uncertainties. If you produce a map and give it to some other team, they will not be able to improve upon that. So, believe me, that it's so disappointing that tens of institutions are doing maps for understanding hazards, and they have not talked to each other to come out with a unified methodology across the country. So if 10 institutions in the country are working on it, they use their own methodology, and none of these recognize the construction and climate change and extreme weather events and so on. So what I'm saying is that when you talk in terms of sustainability, the first and foremost, the root is that how credible is your data on that. That is very, very important. The second is that vulnerability also we don't understand in the right sense. You know, there are number of factors which makes us differently vulnerable to this. So that is there. And of course, the local capacity is one thing there. Normally, you will find that the sustainability is also linked to the care of detail in maintenance of our projects. So there are no maintenance funds and budgets and like that. There's no maintenance strategy. Then in the modern days, for sustainability, you have to have the observational methods, you know, that you have very powerful observational methods, you have instrumentation and all that. So those uncertainties which could not be looked after in olden days, you have no excuse now. You see, you have to build in certain systems and have the observational methods whereby you make those observations to outsmart uncertainties. Okay. So what I would say is that the whole thing needs a huge debate where all aspects are to be covered, including, of course, the inheritance of law. One is, of course, the joy of fulfillment, you know, that anything that we do, we have a joy. The another is the inheritance of loss, that in achieving that joy, how much have you lost? In fact, in my presentation, which is there, you will see that there are examples where we have hugely lost things which we have forgotten. And that inheritance of loss sometimes is a very sad affair. And so your joy of fulfillment will be drastically reduced if you also know that in the process what you have lost.
Thank you, Dr. Bhandari. That is a very detailed and precise answer. So I also have a question. You emphasized a lot on focusing on multi-hazards. Also, I would like to hear your opinion on concurrent and cascading hazards. What we see, the hazards are cascading and concurrent, like landslides converting into debris flows, and then debris flows converting into flash flow. To understand these mechanisms, so what is your suggestion? Where should we start? Whether we should start from the laboratory experiments in order to understand these mechanisms, and your comment on it. Thank you.
Well, I must tell you, Sri Krishna, this is a very good question, and you helped me in covering something which I forgot for want of time. You know, multi-hazard, people don't understand this. They think that it's a static framework we are talking about, that there is a landslide and earthquake, so you can deal with this separately and all that. Multi-hazard means that the nature works in a way where all the forces of nature, including gravity, for that matter, they act 24/7. So how they act, and then once a thing happens, it is not again a static affair. It in turns lead to something else. So when I talked about it on the 6th, you were there, let's say Nanda Devi episode, or let's say Malpa. When the rock mass in Malpa broke down in a myriad of pieces and fell down, or in Nanda Devi, they talk about this dam, artificial dam temporarily built and all, or Alaknanda tragedy, similar dam was there. Now that is a ephemeral situation. And these situations keep changing depending upon what happens during the process. So when you talk in terms of cascading hazard, one of the classical example is that there is let's say debris flow or a landslide that comes from the rear and lowers the lower parts. Now when it lowers the lower parts suddenly, It creates pressure. Sometimes these are artisan. They are monitored as artisan. And you can imagine that what kind of a loss of strength will be there. It's not even the fluid state. It is fluid with artisan pressures that are there. So with that drag, it goes. And this is what you call cascading. But my objection to limiting your view on to cascading is that we have the obligation to define the entire mechanism, not cascading. And these are journalists or newspaper reporters or common man will understand it in the schools and all that. Yes, it cascades and there is a runout effect. But you see the whole literature, rapid motion landslides in New Zealand or those lahars and all that. The whole picture is now quite clear that there are several phenomena that work, and what you need to know is the mechanism. What are the boundaries that will happen? What is the source from which the trouble came? And that source, what did it generate? What is the past history of that area there? So if you have, let's say, old landslide which reoccurs for 100 years, or Kalyasur is one, for example, and all that. If something happens there, it has to be seen in the light of its history there. And then you are right that cascading means that if earthquake has come and there's a landslide, and in landslide there's a runout effect, it will block the river, and then there could be impounding there, or a dam may be created which will breach, and then it will create a fast flood, and then in turn landslide and so on. So this process will go on. And this is what is called scenario projection. If you were to project the 1970 Alaknanda scenario, then same picture will come. So you might have a safe construction downstream, but you have not taken into account this, then it is not multi-hazard safe. So even a safe structure is not multi-hazard safe if you don't take into account the events of this kind which might happen.
Thank you, Dr. Bhandari. Now I invite other participants also to raise some questions.
Maybe I can go next.
Yes,
Yeah.
Rupa.
Thank you, Dr. Bhandari, for this very illuminating talk. I've learned immensely during this 1 hour. I mean, it's more not much of a question, but something for my own understanding. When you said about evaluating the outcomes of our planning in terms of, moving from only cost benefit example or cost benefit calculations to now looking into eco-friendly, whether this is eco-friendly or not, but also do we take into account how people friendly or like people centric our solutions are? So is that something that you will also value at par with these two or more?
Everything is centered on people, that is the centerpiece, center stage, if you say. So you have to remember this is the heart of the problem. When you have, whether it's eco-friendly or nature-friendly and all that kind of thing, it has to serve the cause of the people without damaging nature, without taking those options there. But if you achieve everything in nature and make people unhappy, or don't utilize their growth should be is as important as the growth of the nature and protection of nature. So by all means, and which is why I say that this costing is very flawed. When you do the, now when the cost is done, you see that many of the projects, they don't recognize the kind of damage they do, and the repair will cost so much of money and things like that. When you have these highways being constructed where broadening is there and all that, tons of debris is removed and put in somewhere, which is an environmental hazard and is the cost going to be paid by you and I as taxpayers. Now, that is not recognized. We only bill them or pay them for the transportation and things like that. So our view will have to change. The cost is not something which is can be viewed by only initial calculations and the payment that you have made in return of the services. It's a very different thing now. You have to really, again, the question is that if supposing some solution is going to work for 10 years, another is going to work for 70 years, then again, the question is they both are nature friendly in a sense, but you are trying to give something more to nature than we have taken by our greed so much that we should always try to give more. And let me tell you one thing that Professor D.S. Kothari, who was chairman of the UGC, once told me when I described him this, he said that you should draw rocks from the mountains as cautiously as you draw money from your bank account. Is what he said, that that sensitivity will have to be there. I mean, you might laugh it out. Many people don't recognize this, but if you have that sensitivity in your heart, then you will be a good engineer and you will deliver it. But if millions of cubic meters removal, you can just sign the piece of paper that yes, you want this without, I mean, that may be necessary in some situation, but without stressing yourself that what are the other alternatives, So you have to really be very balanced and focused, and you should be more concerned about your future generations also. Not that you will survive for another 100 years and that would be end of it. That's not the thing. Whether you can pass on the baton to younger people safely.
Thank you, Dr. Bhandari. Again, a very detailed and insightful answer. And other participants, please ask if you have some questions.
Professor Sri Krishnan, there is one in the chat box.
Yeah. Avinash again, he's asking, what is the current status of India in the field of disaster mitigation? Means he's relating to our talk and to our discussion, then asking this question.
What is the rating?
Current status of India.
Current status. Current status is that India is a very few country where we have National Disaster Management Act, which came in 2005. We had a National Disaster Management Policy. Now, this year, we have the National Disaster Mitigation Fund. You also have National Institute of Disaster Management. Disaster Management Authority is there. And then there is a national network. You have State Disaster Management Authority, and down the line is there. So there is a huge amount of change that has come. Then CDRI is there. The Prime Minister of India had actually released that National Disaster Management Plan in 2016. Okay, so that is there. Then Department of Science and Technology, they have commissioned number of studies. In fact, you have seismic microzonation reports. Dr. Nigam of IIT, Dr. Arya, they had authored one report, came from me and Harsh Gupta. So there are 4 or 5 reports were commissioned, where actually initial momentum came from them, and the further work is started on that. Then you have the Department of Earth Sciences in 2014, they brought this report. You have satellite imageries and new technologies, drones, etc. in operation now. So a whole lot, big data, mobile services, and these social media is a very powerful media to reach out to the people for early warning and all that. So I would say that India has lots of things. The only thing which is missing is the team spirit and implementation strategy, the coordination between people, and also the multidisciplinary thing. That's one thing. Secondly, allow me to say 2 unpleasant things. The other thing which is missing is our interest in asking questions. When we talk to senior people or in the technical meetings, etc., I have rarely seen people coming out with different views. They might have different views, but they hold it onto their chest and they don't come out with it. I think the best thing that can happen in this is that we freely and frankly discuss. They are not criticism, they are independent opinions. And therefore, in this context, I would say that any work that we do, we should have independent peer reviews, whether we have produced maps or whatever it is. It is no excuse that it has been done by the people very talented and acknowledged. They should themselves feel happy that this is independently being peer reviewed. So all reports, etc., they must be reviewed, and we must use big data analysis. This is one very strong point I would like to make, because IIT Roorkee has everything under one roof. So you can go ahead and involve those people and try to then link this. Whatever was impossible a few years ago is now possible.
Thank you, Dr. Bhandari, for answering the question again in a very insightful way. Since no more questions, now I would request Professor Rupam to present the vote of thanks. Rupam, you are mute.
Sorry. Yeah. Thank you, Professor Sri Krishnan. It's my immense pleasure to give this vote of thanks and extend my heartiest welcome to Dr. Rajendra Bhandari. For like I already said, I've learned immensely, and I would maybe, if I can speak it for everyone, all the attendees and all our students who are present here, we have had a wonderful, the way you've summarized everything from an international perspective to what's happening in the national arena, to even linking the philosophy of, I would say, disaster mitigation and management in some ways, by highlighting the importance of asking questions, like basic questions, and this philosophy of trying to do things differently. I'm sure, yeah, this is something which will benefit all of us, not only in our research, but also thinking how we frame our solutions to disaster mitigation and risk management. Yeah, I'll also like to thank Professor Ajit Chaturvedi, our director. He's not here with us at the moment, but for his time and also facilitating the lecture. And also, I would like to thank all our faculties from the center who are present at the stage today, and special mention to head of our center, Professor Sumit, for organizing this, and also Professor Sri Krishnan for initiating the lecture series. And this would have not been possible without the support of our technical team. So big thank you to them as well. And then last not the least, to all our students who are present here, I'm sure there's much more that we can discuss from what we have learned today, and there's a lot to implement as well. Thank you. Thanks a lot again.